Welcome to the next human. My name's Arav. Today I'm joined by Professor Ashwin Rao. Thank you so much for being here today. Professor Rao teaches at Stanford in AI and machine learning. He's written a number of books on the topic, and he's even developed his own coursework. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me, Arav, to your podcast.
Thank you for being here again, and let's just jump right into it. So the first thing I want to talk about is the recent hot topic in AI is ChatGPT. So first, I wanted to hear what your thoughts were on the state of ChatGPT, what some of the fears people are worried it's going to start taking jobs, and yeah, I just want to hear what you thought about the state of it currently.
Okay, so there's a couple of different things to say here. I think it's caught the popular imagination, but what I'll say to you, Arav, is that this was a matter of time. I've been looking at language models for the past few years. There were previous versions, so we say ChatGPT 3 and 4 now.
Yeah.
There were 1 and 2, which we've been looking at. My area is not generative AI. My area is reinforcement learning, but because it's close, our area is close, I've been more of a user and evaluator of it rather than a developer of the technology. And I've been evaluating GPT-1, GPT-2, and it was very clear to me that this is a breakthrough. I think it was about 3 years ago when I looked at GPT-2. It was very clear it's a breakthrough. It was all a matter of time before this was going to happen. It probably happened a bit faster than we all expected. I think my prediction would have been more like 2025 is when we would have been at the place we are at right now. So in that sense, it was never a surprise to us as academics and practitioners of machine learning. But what I'll say is that OpenAI has done a very good job in packaging the product very well. Some of this technology is pretty standard now, but it's not easy for any company or any organization to put together the quality of the product that they've put together. So a lot of credit to OpenAI. I have a lot of respect for them. And then the third thing to say is that it's worked out quite well and really shocked people, and everybody's been blown away. There's been strong reactions. And this has happened in history, that there comes a point in time that something is released to the public and people are blown away. There's always going to be a bit of an excess reaction. There's going to be this exaggerated reaction that this is changing everything, it's changing the world. And so I want to tell you that although it's amazing, it's not as amazing or as big a breakthrough as what you would hear from a variety of sources. So one thing to remember is that it works really well for problems where precision is not required. So, making presentations, giving certain types of opinions, or even in software development, you don't need a lot of precision. If you're 80-90% of the way there, it's a pretty good product. And then you can take the output from these language models and massage it and turn it into a product that really works for you. So it's never going to be 100%. This is to remember. I mean, someday maybe it'll get to a point where it'll be so much better than humans that you don't even need a human evaluator. But today or anytime in the near future, I don't expect that to happen. It won't really work on certain types of problems where you have to get it right. So, for example, in my own field, if you're trying to do solve a math problem, as an example, it does solve some math problems. It does write some code, but there can be mistakes in the code at times. And so you have to be careful that you look at it. So use it as a helper rather than a complete solver. And then the last point I want to make is in terms of jobs. You mentioned, is it going to take over jobs? Let's take an example here, programmers as an example. And what I'm going to say here about programmers applies in the other areas of application of language models as well. So when I say language models, ChatGPT is just like one type of language model. There's a whole variety of these language models based on this transformer technology, which are all kind of similar to each other. It's just that ChatGPT has done it a little bit better than others. But I will use the term language models to represent ChatGPT.
Sure.
I would say that it was always clear to us in the last 5 years that there are going to be far lesser programmers required in the future. Today, if you look at the programming community, 80% of the work is pretty mundane, pretty repetitive, and it'll eliminate a lot of the sort of the standard template stuff that programmers have to do today. I don't know if you're much of a programmer, but even before ChatGPT, if you open a typical editor and you start typing code, it would sort of autocomplete, just like when you do Google search, it autocompletes. So coding was always that type of thing. It would autocomplete. We were always getting better and better and more productive with our code. ChatGPT is starting to take it to the next level. When you start writing a function, just the first line, it'll fill out the next 10 lines for you. Now, often it won't be right, but sometimes it's right. And you can just look at the code and say, hey, that looks right, and let it pass and move to the next function. So in those situations, your productivity can go up by like maybe a factor of 3, which is pretty big. Previously we had a factor of maybe 30-40% improvement. Now we're talking like 200 to 300% improvement. So what that means is people will do more stuff in lesser time. You can look at it in different ways. Everybody's more efficient. This means with the same group of programmers, you can produce more in less time. Or you can say, hey, I have a budget because humans cost money, machines don't cost much money. So with my budget, what I can do with what I was doing with 10 programmers, I can now do with 3 programmers in the same amount of time. So that's the trade-off you have to decide. Either you can stick with your 10 programmers and get more done, or you can say, I just want 3 programmers. So I don't think it's going to eliminate jobs. I think what happens is that people will, the best programmers will still remain. Maybe the top 20 to 30% will remain. And they will continue to work with these technologies to get better and produce more work. But I think the other group of programmers who are maybe not the best programmers in the world, they will find other jobs. There are other jobs to do. So I personally don't think there's going to be a social crisis in terms of like people not having anything to do. As AI develops, there will be other types of jobs created. And historically, this question has always been asked. The new technologies come in, will people lose jobs? It's actually never happened. People have just adapted, found new things to do, new jobs have emerged. We've always been in a situation where there is more to do and lesser number of people. And I think that will just remain. You'll just see a bit of a shift happening. And I think it's a good thing, especially in our Indian community. Everybody wants to go into software development. I'm actually happy that now people will start looking at other things to do and not just focus on software.
Yeah, no, I think what's scaring people, as you mentioned earlier, is just how fast this all is happening. I know, I think people they haven't realized really like what's been going on behind the scenes and how we've basically reached up to this point, and now they like are opening their phones and seeing the news and stuff all about this hype that's kind of created this panic almost around AI. And yeah, I think that's might be what be scaring these people into saying, we're going to start losing jobs, self-driving cars are going to like take these truck drivers off the road and stuff. So yeah, I mean, yeah.
Look, truck drivers, that world I'm actually familiar with that world because I used to work in retail for 6 years. And so I've spent a lot of time thinking about physical labor, what is happening to that world. Now, remember, this is a different type of problem than programmers or designers or writers losing jobs. The
creative aspect, yeah.
People use is like white collar, blue collar, right? Like, so those white collar jobs, we now feel like those jobs are under threat by AI. I personally don't think anybody's under threat. I think it's just a good thing for everybody. But that's the type of talk that's been going on. But you know what? 5 years ago, we were all predicting that the only people who would be under threat would be the blue collar people, the people who are working in the warehouses, people who are truck drivers, people who are like plumbers and doing things with their hands. And we imagine that we will have all these machines which will just do the physical work. But actually, that is not happening. I would say the blue collar workers are pretty safe, I would say, for the next 5 to 10 years at least. I can't predict that far out in the future. People thought blue collar workers were at risk and not white collar, but now the whole thing is reversed. So you see, again, people exaggerate a lot of these things, right? So previously, when there were predictions of blue collar workers being under threat, it was not the case. And now saying white collar people are under threat, it's not the case. But I would say this, let's take the truck driver examples. Today, there's a law in America that you need 2 truck drivers to drive the truck because one of them falls sick or maybe falls asleep or whatever, somebody else can take control. That regulation may go away. You may just need 1 truck driver because the machine can take control. But you could also now have a situation where you don't even need a truck driver. Well, you'll need a person in the truck sitting there, not really driving on the highway. But once it exits the highway, the person can take control and drive it to the warehouse. This is already starting to happen. And is that a good thing for society? If you look at the lives of some of these truck drivers, it has already been very harsh. It has been very difficult. We have to solve a more fundamental problem. How do we empower these type of people? And if they lose their jobs, we need to figure out where can we place them, right? So this is the type of dialogue that should happen now in society. Those jobs have been diminishing and they'll keep diminishing. And I see where that reaches is like you will just have like trucks definitely fully self-driving on the highway in the next few years. And then the next step would be they would be driving autonomously everywhere. Regulation may not catch up with it. This is the problem. That may take more time. So I think if you talk 10 years, I would say you'll probably see everything electric, everything self-driving. Regulation may require that at least 1 person sit in the car and just to take some responsibility or monitor or make some exceptional decisions in case some situation happens. So this is where we are probably heading in terms of physical labor. But if you look at like our kitchens and bathrooms, plumbers and cooks and cleaners, are they going to get replaced? I don't think so anytime soon. I think at least for another decade, I'm not seeing a cheap way to make reliable robots that would cook your meal in the kitchen, that would clean your house, or even give you a good haircut. It's not as easy as people imagine this to be.
But so you mentioned regulation, and I was just wondering, like, what kind of direction do you think that regulation will head? Do you think it'll be more restrictive, more like liberal? Like, do you think, well, what direction do you think this regulation is going to go?
This is always going to be slow because regulators, the governments are still trying to play catch up. As you said, all this stuff has moved very fast. You see a lot of cars here in California, pretty much the Teslas are being driven, self-driving on the highway, most of them. But let's take the example of insurance. The insurance, today there's a law that says like everybody has to be insured. People are trying to figure out how does this change with self-driving cars? Like, what does it mean? The self-driving car gets into an accident with another self-driving car. Whose fault is it? Who is to be blamed? It's unclear. You might say it's the software bug. Is it the person's the car owner's responsibility or the car manufacturer's responsibility? So you can see this is a pretty complex area, and there has to be a debate on this. It will take a long time to figure this out because the answers are not so easy.
Okay, so now I wanted to like switch tracks a little bit and talk about for like young people, maybe high school, college age, what steps do you think they should take? How best should they educate themselves, and how should they like jump into this world as someone like me?
Let me give you an analogy with cars. I'll draw the analogy of AI with cars.
Mhm.
Everybody will use AI in the future. It's all very clear, just like everybody was driving cars.
Mhm.
But not everybody knows all the insides of the car. How does the engine work in the car? How is a car actually manufactured, put together? There's a lot of physics and math that has gone in, and mechanical engineering that has gone into like making cars.
Mhm.
I would say not even 1% of the people know that type of technology, but they know about cars. They know considerable amount of cars, and they know how to drive the car, and they're kind of experts at using it. This is how I want you, young people, to think about it, that you should look at AI not as something that you necessarily want to become an expert at, but you should know how to use it.
Mhm.
Okay, so I want to separate that. Now, there are some people who want to develop AI in the future. Those would be like the people who were interested in making cars
Yeah.
in the past. Now, that's the analogy, right? There were a few people, they went into mechanical engineering. So if you like the field of math and computer science or even physics, this type of stuff, you have a very natural affinity to get into the world of developing AI, right? So if you're in that area, I would say invest a lot. If you want to be the future developer of AI, invest a lot in understanding the foundations of math and computer science. And this is the type of stuff that I teach at Stanford. And so I'm happy to help. So even though I teach at Stanford at the grad level, I've also been involved in teaching high school students on some of the foundations of math and computer science that are required to then move on to be able to doing computer science and AI in college. So we can talk about that part, but I want to tell you that that's not for everybody. Like not everybody likes math and computer science. You will then have, those people would have to learn how to use AI. Um, and that is a very complex topic. You have to be more of like a polyglot. You have to start understanding history. You have to understand psychology, sociology, you have to understand like government policies and all this stuff, right? Like there's a lot of areas that AI is going to influence in society, and you'll have to get into that space. And then you have to start understanding products, AI products, like how to design an AI product. So if you look in the industry, there's this divide between programmers and product managers, right? The programmers actually build the technology, and the product managers put the technology together as an app or something and deliver it to the whoever they want to sell it to.
Yeah.
So first step for all high school students is to figure out what you like to do. Are you more like a programmer, or are you like a product person? And based on that, you have to start studying the right things. So if somebody wants to develop AI, I think they should just double down on the math and CS. But if you don't want to be a developer of AI and user of AI, then you have to go broader and start looking at what would it take to build good products based on AI. And then you have to get into some of the social sciences and psychology, sociology, and these type of things that I talked about.
So, like, speaking about the future of AI, I was wondering like what you thought about kind of like the last. Do you think like first of all AI will make its way into like every aspect of life in the next like 10, 20 years? And like what do you think are the last industries to go, basically last sectors that AI will make its way into?
The last, I, I, I mean, I don't think there's an ending point. I think there's just a continuum. And this is a very hard question, Arav. I don't think anybody really would be able to answer this type of question. But I'll go back to my earlier point about the sort of the white collar and blue collar jobs. I can speak at that level of abstraction that you will see a huge impact in the next 5 years in things like software development, in middle managers at companies who are writing a lot of emails, and even like writers of New York Times. These kind of people are going to get affected a lot earlier. But if you look at the blue collar people, they're going to come much later. I actually think it will take more than a decade before you can start replacing people like cooks and plumbers anybody who works with their hands, and there's like some delicate touch required and some nuances in like the physical work. Cleaning the house also, right? If you look at like if cleaners come to your house and you think about like how they clean the house, and you say that I'm going to replace this with robots, that's not just the math, that's also the mechanical engineering and some of the decision making, some of the communication with the owner of the house. There's a lot of complexity involved here. That type of stuff will get replaced by AI at some point, but I'm going to give it like 10 to 20 years from now.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds very reasonable. Can I ask you kind of a silly question, just to pick your brain a little?
Sure.
So a lot of people are, scared about AI like taking over like a, Terminator type Skynet situation. And yeah, like what do you think? Do you think there's a possibility that in the future AI will run the government and start killing people?
I don't think you're going to have like a Terminator type situation where you'll have like a physical robot. So I'll go back to my point about like physical things and sort of virtual things. If you wanted to build like a physical robot that is going to like walk around on the streets and maybe do some damage, like for war, people are talking about this, right? You send robots to war and stuff. Yeah. It's already being worked on by the US government. There's a lot of things happening there. But if you thought that robots will just become so intelligent, these physical robots, that they will go interact with people and start killing them or whatever, that's very unlikely, because we have a lot of measures in place to sort of shut it down. Okay? Yeah. I can guarantee that in 20 to 30 years, because who knows what's going to happen. But I don't see that type of stuff happening in the next decade. But what I see happening, I'll tell you what is much more likely to happen is people can write software that can cheat you, like scam, fraud and scam, this kind of stuff. This is not a physical thing moving around like shooting people, right, or doing damage or whatever, hurting people. But the software in your computer can be run by AI that can be intelligent enough to figure out like how to cheat people and do a lot of damage that way. It can steal all your money, right? It can like you've seen all these scam and fraud that goes on today, right? By real people, and they're not even that smart, and yet they're able to cheat people. This is the type of stuff we should be worried about. That if AI is not monitored properly, you can have all kinds of nasty companies out there which could build technology to actually do serious damage, like robberies. I don't mean physical robberies. I mean like on the internet.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for answering that question. But I was just wondering, you're like so like up to date on all this stuff. Very like you have a lot of knowledge on current things going on. And I was just wondering, like, how do you keep yourself up to date on like all this stuff going around?
I am actually not much of a reader. I don't spend much time reading. I'm not a very up-to-date person in general. Mm-hmm. The reason you're finding me up to date is because you're asking me questions in my own field of interest, a very specific area of machine learning, right? So because I work so actively in the field, even if I don't read anything, the people I work with, like my students and my colleagues or my industry colleagues, academic colleagues, you just can't miss it. Like, and then, when you have those conversations, you think about it. So because it's my field, I seem to know a lot more than most other people do. But in general, this is not true about me. I'm pretty clueless about what's going on in the world. For example, during COVID, I had no idea what the counts was, how much the everyday deaths was, and I just didn't pay attention. I'm not much of a reader, I just don't keep up with stuff. So I'm telling you that I'm not saying that's a good thing or bad thing. I'm just pointing out one can be either way and do fine in life. Some people want to know every piece of information that's out there and read a lot and keep up, and that's one route to success. But I've also seen lots of other people who just sort of don't bother with so much information. They just do their thing, and they're also pretty successful.
That's great. Yeah, so just one last thing before we wrap up. I was just wondering, to all the Gen Zers out there watching this, if you had, like one piece of advice to give, as they're just like entering, adolescence, adulthood, just in general.
I'll give a very general comment. The thing I get most scared by today, much more than this AI or whatever, is just social media. I think it's causing a lot of damage to young people. I have two kids myself, and I talk to them every day about it. This is very troubling because a lot of the social media is meant to addict you. But remember, this is the type of thing I fear. It's social media is really AI today, right? The AI is behind social media is built in a way to get you addicted. And we young people just need to create some kind of discipline to get away from social media. I personally think none of the social media is good for you. You guys should go out and meet each other, spend more physical time together, make more friends and laugh more and go play sports, music, the traditional things we used to do before we got online. So if as much as you can break out of being online, I think you'll do yourself a lot of good.
That's great. Okay, well, thank you so much for that piece of advice and for being here today to talk on the podcast. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Arav, and good luck with everything you aspire to be during your high school years and beyond.